you're using your calculator, you're going to go back to input output. So you're going to put information for like your number of period, your interest, present value, future value. However, in this case, contrary to chapter 5, you're going to have both a payment and you're going to have a future value. So in chapter 5, we have different cases. In first case, you add a future value in the future, like a lump sum, and you compute what will be the present value. In the second case, you have an annuity, which is payment that you receive every period, and you compute the present value. In this case, you're going to actually use both. So you're going to input what is your payment, and your payment will be your coupon interest payment, and then you're going to put what is your future value, which would be here your par value, and then you're going to put what is your interest rate or yield, what is the number of period or years maturity, and you're going to compute for your present value. And your present value will be the value of the bond. Your payment will be your coupon interest payment, which is equal to your coupon interest rate times your par value. Your yield to maturity will be your interest that you use here. Your number of period will be your years maturity. And your future value will be your par value. So you do the same thing that we've been doing in chapter 5. However, you're going to have both a payment and a future value. So let's go over a couple of examples. So here we have a 10-year bond with 10% annual coupon, and the yield to maturity or the interest is 10%. So they're asking you what will be the value of the bond. So one thing that you can determine is that size is a bond. Each bond are issued as an increment of 1,000. So we'll say that the value of the bond will be 1,000 at par value. So here we're only looking at one bond. So we're going to say that the value of the bond at par value, the par value of the bond will be 1,000. They're telling us this is a 10-year bond. So that means that the maturity will be in year 10. So the bond will mature in year 10. Then they're telling us that the coupon rate is actually 10%. This information is good because it allows us to determine the coupon payment or coupon interest payment. And how do you compute that? That will be your par value, 1,000 times 10%. So 1,000 times 10%, that will give you 100. So you're going to have 100 as your coupon payment every period. So then they gave us the interest rate or the yield, which is here 10%. So then they're asking you to find what will be the value of the bond. So if you're using your calculator, this is what you're going to do. Okay. You're going to put in the number of period. Here it's a 10-year bond, so your number of period will be 10. So you're going to input 10. You're going to put in the interest. They told you that the yield maturity here is 10%. So then you're going to have 10% as your interest. You're going to put your coupon interest payment, and we computed that, and that gives you 100 coupon interest payment. So you're going to put that as your payments, and then your par value is 1,000. You're going to put 1,000 as your par value, and you compute for your present value. That will give you 100,000. If you're using Excel, what you're going to do, you're going to use the Excel function for present value, which is here. You're going to put your interest first, and that will be your yield as a decimal. Then you're going to put the number of period, which is 10 years here. And then you're going to put your payment, which is 100 here. And then you're going to put your future value, which is 1,000. And it will ask you for your type. You're going to put 0 because we assume it's an ordinary type. So the question will be, why didn't we put minus payment? Because we're trying to compute the present value, and the present value will always take the minus sign. We assume that you pay the present value in order for you to get a payment of 100 and the future value of 1,000. So that's why we didn't put a negative sign for the payment. So let's try to compute that in Excel. Okay, so if you remember, that's the Excel sheet we actually use for chapter 5 time value of money, and I'm using the same Excel sheet to show you that it's actually the same thing that you did in chapter 5. However, this time you have to have a future value and a payment. So here they told us that the par value is 1,000. The interest is 10%, so you put it as a decimal 0.1. The number of period is 10. The payment is 100. So then you're going to go equal present value, open the parentheses, you select your rate, you select your number of period, you select your payment, you select your future value. It's going to ask you for a type. We're going to assume that the type is 0, end of period. You only assume that it's beginning of period if the exercise, if the contract says that it's beginning of period. If there's no mention of beginning of period, always assume that it's end of period. So we're going to put 0, close the parentheses, press enter, and it's going to give you the present value, which is 1,000. And this is the same thing that we found here. We found that the future value and the present value are actually the same. The reason why we found that the future value is the same than the present value here is because in this case we have a interest rate, which is the yield, which is the same than the coupon interest rate. So because you have the same value for your coupon interest rate, you're going to have the same value for your future value and present value, and this would be called a par bond, or a bond that's selling at par. So that means that in this case you have a bond that's selling at par, or a par bond. Let's go over another example. So here you have the same bond. However, now instead of having a coupon rate of 10%, you're going to have a coupon rate of 13%. So what will happen to the bond? So first, the annual coupon, or the annual coupon interest, will change. It will now be 13% times 100, which would give you 130. Since they're assuming that the risk is the same, so we'll assume that the yield to maturity didn't change, so the yield to maturity is 10%. The maturity of the bond is 10 years. So the question will be, what is the present value of the bond? So to compute the present value of the bond, you're going to put the number of period, or the years to maturity here is 10 years. The interest, 10%. The payment, or coupon interest payment, 130. And the face value or future value would be 1,000. And then you compute for your present value. And if you're using your calculator, that will give you 1,184.34. If you're using Excel, you're going to have to input the new values. So your future value would be 1,000. Your interest rate, which is the yield, is still 10%, so you're going to put it as a decimal. Your number of period is still 10, but now your payment is 130. So then you go equal present value, open the parentheses, select your rate, then select your number of period, then select your payment, then select your future value, then press 0, and you press enter. That will give you minus 1,184.34. So your present value will be minus 1,184.34, which is the same amount that we found here. So here, what do you notice? You notice that your present value is actually higher than your future value. So what does it mean for the bond? It means that the bond actually sells at a premium. So why do we know that the bond sells at a premium? Because first, the present value is higher than the future value, and also your coupon interest rate, 13%, is higher than your yield to maturity, which is 10%. So then we will assume that that's a premium bond, so it's still at the premium, it's still at a higher price than its actual value. This is also another example that we're going to go over, but in this case, the coupon is changing to actually 7% of the par value. So now the coupon interest rate is 7%. So if you multiply that by 1,000, that will give you $70. So $70 is what you have for your coupon payment. The risk is still the same, so we assume that the yield is still 10%. The maturity is still 10 years, and the future value is still 1,000. So then they're asking you to compute what would be the value of the bond. So to help anybody that is planning to use the calculator, I'm going to use the calculator for this example so that you can see what you're supposed to do with your calculator. So what you're going to do, you're going to put your number of period here, 10 years, so 10 number of period. Then you're going to input the number of the interest rate or the yield to maturity, which is 10 here. Then you're going to input your payment. In this case, the payment is 70. And then you're going to compute or impute your future value, which is in this case 1,000. And you're going to compute present value. That will give you minus 815.66, which is the same thing that we find here. If you're using Excel, you just have to put equal present value, select your rate as a decimal, select your number of periods, select your payment, and select your future value. And if you do that, you're going to find the same answer, which is minus 815.66. Okay. So most of the example that we saw so far for the bonds are based on annual payment. So they told you that the coupon interest will be paid annually, so you have an annual coupon interest. However, in the real life, what you see is that most bonds you will have actually semi-annual payment. So for example, let's look at an example with Apple. So if you look at here, payment frequency, it's not annual, it's semi-annual, and most of the bond will be like that. So you're going to have a coupon to receive a coupon twice in a year, so 2 payment of your coupon during a year. So then how do you compute the value of a bond if you know that you're going actually to receive 2 payments in a year? This is what you're going to do. So first, you're going to have to change some of your values or some of your input in order to reflect that it's a semi-annual. For the number of period, if they give you a number of period of 10 years, you assume that it's actually multiplied by 2 because you're going to get 2 payments in a year. So you're going to do 2 times 10 years, that would be 20 years. For the periodic rate or for the yield to maturity, the yield to maturity is always given to you as an annual rate. So what you're going to do, you're going to divide the yield to maturity by 2, and that will be your periodic rate that you're going to use in your calculation. And finally, the coupon payment or the annual interest coupon interest payment, what you're going to do, you're going to divide that by 2 also, because you're going to have equal amounts of your annual interest payment or annual coupon payment during the year. So there's 3 elements that you're going to change. You're going to change the number of periods multiplied by 2. You're going to divide your nominal rate by 2, and you're going to divide your annual coupon by 2. So then this is what you're going to input in your calculator. Number of periods will be 2 times the number of years. The interest will be the yield to maturity divided by 2. The payment will be the coupon interest, the annual coupon interest payment divided by 2. And your future value, you're not going to change it, it's still going to be 1,000, and you compute your present value. So let's go over an example. So what if what is the value of a 10-year bond that has 10% semi-annual coupon payment and a yield to maturity of 13%? So now this coupon is a semi-annual coupon, so you're receiving 2 coupons in a year. The yield to maturity is 13%, and the number of period is 10%. So what are you going to do? First, you have to change the number of period to include the 2 payment. You have to change the coupon payments to include the 2 payment, and you have to change also the yield to maturity. So what are we going to do? We're going to multiply the number of years by 2. Here we have 10 years. 10 times 2, that will be 20 years. Then we're going to divide the nominal rate by 2. Here the nominal rate is 13%. We're going to divide by 2, that's 6.5. Finally, your coupon interest payment will be 10% of 1000, which is 100, and you divide that by 2, that will give you 50. So then you're going to now input number of period 2, interest rate 6.5, and payment 50. Remember, you do not change your future value, so your future value will still be the same. So then what do you do if you're using a calculator? Number of periods 20, interest 6.5%, payment 50, future value 1000. You press compute and it's going to give you the present value. If you're using Excel, your future value will be 1000. Your interest will be 6.5%, which is in decimal 0.65. Your number of periods will now be 20, and your payment would be 50. So you're going to put equal, select your rate, equal present value, sorry. Select your rate, select the number of period, select the payment, select the future value, and we assume it's end of period 0, and press enter. So that will give you 834.72, which is the same thing that we found for using our Excel sheet and using a calculator also. So let's solve for the yield to maturity using the calculator first. They provided you with information concerning the number of period, the payment, the present value, the future value. So what you're going to do, you're going to input all this value in your calculator and solve for IYR, which will be your yield. So you're going to do number of period equals 10, payment 90, future value 1000, present value minus 887, and compute for the interest rate. So if you use your calculator, and always remember to clear your TVM, you're going to have 10 as your number of period, 90 as your payment, 1000 as your future value, and 807 as your present value, and you compute for your interest, and that gives you 10.91. If you're using Excel, which we're going to do here, you're going to input the value that you have, which is 1000 for your future value, minus 887 for your present value. The number of period is 10. Your payment is 90. So then you're going to use the function rate. So you're going to put equal rate, open the parentheses. It's going to ask you for the number of period here is 10, the payment 90, the present value 887, the future value 1000, and it will ask you if it's an end of period or beginning of period. We assume it's an end of period, so 0, and you close the parentheses. You don't have to put in any guess. Excel will calculate directly. So you put enter. So Excel will find an interest of percentage of 10.91%, which is exactly the same that what we found for our Excel from our PowerPoint. So solving for IYR, the year to maturity of this bond is 10.91%. Looking at this bond, we see two things. First, you look at the present value and future value. You see that actually your present value is lower than your future value. And also when you look at the yield to maturity, you see that your yield to maturity is higher than your coupon rate, which was 9%. So in this case, we can say that we have actually a discount bond. So if you remember, a discount bond is a bond that has a price that's lower than the future value, and also yield to maturity that's higher than the coupon rate. So in this case, your yield to maturity is higher than the coupon rate. So let's look at the second example. So in this example, they gave us the future value or the first value 1000. Your coupon interest payment is 90. Your number of period is 10, and your present value is minus 1134.20. So I left it blank because I want you to try yourself at home in order to be able to solve what is the interest rate. You can either use your calculator or your Excel sheet. However, when you're going to solve that, you're going to find that your interest rate is 7.08%. So what I want you to do is try to yourself to compute this value and see if you're able to find 7.8%. That would be a good practice for you for the practice question and for the exam. And one thing that you will notice when you're going to do that is that actually your bond is sells at a premium, because your yield to maturity is going to be lower than your coupon rate, and your price is actually higher than your future value or your face value. But I'm leaving that blank for you, and I want you to try to compute these interests. Compute what will be the yield to maturity. So let's go back to our PowerPoint. We're going to have 10.91% minus the current yield, 10.15%. That would give us the capital gain yield, which is 0.76%. So for this period, or for this year, the capital gain yield was 0.76%. So if you have the yield to maturity, you can actually compute the current yield and capital gain yields, because you also have the coupon. So then you can actually compute what will be your current yield, remove your current yield for your yield to maturity, and compute your capital gain yield. So these are the type of yield that you will have if you have a bond. So far we went over how to value a bond. We discussed about yield in terms of yield to maturity, current yield, and capital gain yield. Another element that we're going to discuss about is the yield to call. So if you remember when we went over the provision, we saw that a bond can have actually a call provision. This call provision will allow the company that issued the bond to call back the bond at a period before the end of the bond or before the maturity. So then if you're the owner of the bond and Apple is going to call the bond, you as the owner, you're going to receive what we call a yield to call. This yield will be how much interest do you get by giving back the bond before maturity at the call price. So let's see how you can compute the yield to call. So here they gave us a 10-year, 10% semi-annual coupon bond selling for 1,135.90. They tell you that this bond can be called 4 years in 4 years at 1,050, and they want to know what is its yield to call. So to compute the yield to call, you'll need the information about the future value of the bond, the payment of the bond or coupon payment of the bond, the number of period for the bond, and the present value of the bond. Remember, the present value of the bond is the price, so it was given here as 1,135.90. Here, the future value is not going to be the value of the bond at maturity or the principal, but it's going to be the value that the bank, on the value of that the company is going to pay you in order for them to be able to call the bond. And here they're paying you 1,050. They're doing that in 4 years. So if you buy the bond now, you're going to hold it for 4 years until you get the 1,050. So if you have to to compute your yield to call, you're going to use your bond price, your call price as your future value, your number of period until the bond is called as your years to maturity. Your coupon will not change. It will be 10% of your future value, of your face value, which was 1,000, and you're going to use that to compute. So here they already solved for the year to maturity, and we're not going to solve for the year to maturity, but we're going to solve for the yield to call. You do the same thing that you do for solving for the yield to maturity, except that the time to call is used for n and the call premium is used for your future value. So this is what you're going to put in Excel. In this case, you're going to hold the semi-annual bond for 4 years before it's called. So then your number of period here will be 2 times 4. That will be equal to 8. You know at which price you're going to buy it today, which is 1,135.90. The coupon payment will be 50. And how do we compute the coupon payment 50? We did the face value or the par value, which is 1,000 times 10%. That gives you 100. And then, because it's a manual, we divide that by 2. That gives you 50. So make sure that if you're trying to compute the yield to call, that you do not use the call price in order to compute the coupon payment, because whether you have a call or not, your coupon payment are always going to be the same. So the coupon payment will always be coupon interest times the face value or par value, which is always 1,000. And if it's a manual, you divide by 2. So that's how we got payment 50. Then the future value will be the call premium or the call price that you get at the end, which will be 1,050. And then you're going to compute for your interest. So let's say that I'm using my calculator here. You clear your TVM. So your number of period will be 8. Your present value will be 135.90. And it's your present value, so it takes minus. Your payment will be 50. Your future value will be 1,050. And you compute IY. That will give you 3.5687837. So 3.57 of roughly 3.6%. So this will be your yield to call. But remember, your yield to call is always an annual rate. So this rate that you found is the interest rate that you get for a semi-annual coupon bond. But however, it's not the annual rate, and your yield to call has to always be an annual rate. So what you're going to do, you're going to use this value and you're going to multiply that by 2. So if you multiply by 2, that gives you 7.14. So your yield to call would be 7.14%. And you can also do that using your Excel sheet. You put your interest, you put your number of period, your payment, your present value, future value, and you compute, and that will give you also the interest.